Welcome back to the Bad Iron Podcast. All two of you that are listening, I hope you have been taking some of my advice on these early games in the NFL and in college football so far. Doing quite well. Had the Chargers last night over my beloved Chiefs. Kind of knew that was going to happen in that situation. Divisional game, underdog, Chargers win it outright. We also had James Madison last night covering the spread against Louisville. And a pretty decent weekend in the first weekend of the college football season. Let's get to some of the college games today. It's not as good of a slate as last week, but there are definitely some opportunities, I think, out there. We're just kind of going to scroll through some of these games. You may or may not be looking at some of these games, but we're going to talk about them briefly here this morning. Saturday morning, college football, the best weekend of the year, September 6th, 2025. Let's get into some of the games. The first one is an underrated game, maybe one of the better games on the card today. There are two of them, actually, that start at 11 a.m. Hopefully you get to listen to this before it's 11 a.m. Central Time. Illinois on the road at Duke. They're right now a 2.5-point favorite. Illinois is a 2.5-point favorite at Duke. I don't really love this game, but I'm going to watch it. The quarterbacks in this game are really good. Duke has the quarterback that came over from Tulane, who, if you saw last year, was on the verge of making a playoff push. And he came over from Tulane, went to Duke to get into a better conference. Last name, I believe, is Mensah. He threw for almost 400 yards last week, even though against soft competition. This game will be a fun one to watch. If the line goes up to 3, I'm taking the home dog of Duke. If it's at 2.5, I'm not really a big fan of this game. I would still lean Duke and probably do the money line on Duke to win. I do think Illinois is a really solid team, but I think Duke is very much under the radar this year. If Duke had any home field advantage, this would probably be a pick'em game. So we're going to lean on Duke, and it's definitely a pick if that number gets to 3. Remember, I've talked about how important it is to get those key numbers, and 3 is a big key number, more so in football than in NFL. And that's a great example last night I just wanted to talk about that just popped into my head. The line on last night was the Chiefs -3 against the Chargers. And we talked about juice, how much the house takes. They get to pick how much they take. There's no law that says that they can take 50% if they want. You just wouldn't do that. But the standard is 10%. Well, last night, the Chiefs were -3, and it was -120 at kickoff. So you had to pay an additional 10% to the house if you took the Chiefs. I'm sorry. It was on the Chargers. +3 was -120. No, it was the Chiefs. Sorry, we're going back. It was the Chiefs. -3 was at -120. I liked the Chargers, but I really liked the Chargers +3.5. So I was looking at that number, and +3.5 was all the way up to -130. So it's a half a point, goes from -120 to -130. Anyway, I did not take the 3.5. I took the Chargers money line, and it worked out. All that being said, obviously you can tell this morning I haven't had my coffee. I don't have my notes in front of me, or I don't have any notes in front of me. But I just remember that from last night, that you got to look at that vig that the house is taking, because it can make a huge difference over time, especially if you're betting more than 1 or 2 games or betting every week. It's going to make a big difference. So the number makes a difference, but the juice also makes just as much difference. Okay, first game out of the way. The next big game, there's 2 more here, I think, at 11. Iowa State. Great matchup. I've watched Iowa State play both games. I lost on them last week. They played much better than I thought coming back from Dublin. This game is Iowa State -3.5, and the over-under is only 43. This game's always a slobber knocker and low scoring, and in those cases, I always take any dog that's more than 3 points. Even though I think Iowa State is the better team in this game, I am taking Iowa +3.5 on the road at Iowa State. Iowa State may win the game, but I do think Iowa keeps it close. And if it goes to history, this one will be a defensive battle and come down to the last possession. So that'll be another good one to watch. Not as fun as Duke, Illinois. The next one that I've got on the list is Baylor SMU, and this will be another really fun game to watch. And it's another game that I'm looking for a little bit of a line move help, and that's Baylor at SMU. I think the number is that SMU has not beaten Baylor since the late 80s, I believe it is. Maybe it's the early 90s. In other words, it's been a long time since SMU has beaten Baylor. This looks to be like one of their best chances on paper. They're 2.5-point favorites. Ranked 17th, beat SMU. 2.5-point favorite is all they are at home against Baylor. That should tell you all you need to know there. Baylor is much better than advertised. They played a really tough, physical, rushing attack in Auburn last week, and we had Auburn in that game over Baylor, so we won that one. I'm reversing it this week. If this line gets to 3, come on, people, bet SMU. Get this line to 3, because I would really like to take Baylor at 3 points here. If it doesn't get to 3, I more than likely will take them on the money line. I think Baylor had a chance to win that game at Auburn, but once again, that was just a bad matchup. More than likely, they shouldn't have been looking ahead, but they might have been looking ahead to this big rivalry game this week with SMU. I think SMU is down a little bit this year after their playoff run last year. Give me Baylor. If it gets to +3, that's what we're looking for. We're going to take the +3 Baylor at SMU. Moving on down the list, there's another game at 11 that I like, and the number has just moved to where I want it to be, and that's UConn at Syracuse. We had Syracuse at Tennessee last week because the number was big. We only lost by a couple of points. Syracuse hung in there. From what I saw in that game, Syracuse can't stop anything. So, and UConn is really underrated. Had a great season last year for them, and they're a much better team. And UConn is getting 7.5 points now in Syracuse, and I love that number. I would even take it at 7. So give me UConn +7.5 versus Syracuse. This game might be pretty high scoring, which is weird to think. I mean, this is a basketball game. Maybe there'll be a basketball score in this game, 64-62 or something like that. But I do think UConn keeps it close in this game and covers that 7.5. And if it gets to 8, it would be even better. But we'll take it at 7.5. A lot of big teams are playing big dogs today. Big, like Georgia's, Austin Peay. We're not going to get into that one. Last week it's a big deal in week 1 when a big FBS home favorite plays another FBS team. They usually do very well and cover the spread. We're not doing that this week. A lot of these teams are FCS teams. Georgia playing Austin Peay, Ohio State playing Grambling. I mean, why are we even scheduling these games? These games aren't worth watching. Clemson-Troy is a little interesting. We'll see how Clemson bounces back after LSU handled them last week, which we also had that one. East Tennessee State is an interesting play because it's a 41-point spread. Tennessee's got a huge game coming up next week, and I believe it's Georgia at home. I'm going to check that real quick just to make sure I got that right. Yeah, so they've got Georgia at home next week. They might be looking ahead, and that 41 is a big number. I would lean East Tennessee State to keep it close in that game, under the 41-point spread. But we're going to move on to other games like Kansas at Missouri. This game has kind of moved back and forth. This is another one that's going to be fun to watch at 2:30 Central today. Kansas, Missouri, huge rivalry game. I want to say 120 years worth of playing football, something in that realm. Kansas, Missouri both have performed well. Kansas already has 2 games under their belt. Both offenses have looked really good. Of course, Missouri has not played anybody yet. But I really like this. I really like to watch this game. I'm not going to wager on it. My play would be Missouri, although very lightly because the spread is 5.5. I'm not a big fan of that number. I'd rather it be closer to 4. I don't think it's going to get there, so I'm probably going to pass on this game. But this one will be a fun one to watch. My official play here is actually going to be over the 48. I do think there can be some points scored in this game. I know unders do pretty well in the early weeks of college football, but I think these two teams have pretty high-powered offenses. There's really not much of a home field advantage here either. So if I had to lean on the line, I probably, if it's 5.5 or 6 or 6.5, I would take Kansas. If it gets down to 3 or 4, I would take Missouri. The 5 is one that I just don't want to touch. So there you have it for that game. I will definitely be keeping an eye out on that game, but I am a Kentucky fan, a Kentucky alum, so I will be watching a big one, Ole Miss at Kentucky. Now, I've already bet this before the line started moving. It's back down to what I bet it at. Kentucky's an 8.5-point underdog. I'm taking Ole Miss. I'm taking Ole Miss minus 8.5 on the road to Kentucky. I'm going to be rooting for Kentucky, but my money's going to be on Ole Miss. I just don't think Kentucky has the talent to match up with Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin clearly has been pointing to this game since last year. Kentucky knocked them out of the playoff contention. So give me Ole Miss minus 8.5. If it gets at 10, I wouldn't take it, but 8.5, I do like that number. We'll watch it closely. The money's been kind of coming in on Kentucky lately, and definitely has been coming in on the under, just the way Kentucky likes to play football. But I think Mississippi may hold Kentucky to less than 2 touchdowns in this game. So give me Mississippi minus 8.5. Quickly at that time, 2:30 also, I'm taking Oregon minus 27.5 against Oklahoma State. Oregon at home, Oklahoma State, dumpster fire last year. I'm not sure they've completely recovered from that. Oregon's going to be a little bit upset. Some of the trash talking coming out of Gundy and Oklahoma State. So give me Oregon to cover the 27.5 in that game. And we're going to move on to a few more that are on the docket today as I scroll down through all these games. I mean, I know you want to hear my take on Texas State, UTSA. There's also St. Francis and Buffalo. That has to be a great game to watch. Middle Tennessee, Wisconsin. Derek Mason coaching Middle Tennessee from right here in my backyard. We're not touching those. We're definitely going to take South Florida, though. Plus the 19 it is now at Florida. I do think Florida is really good. This is an SEC game. South Florida may bounce off their big win last week, but I think South Florida has enough talent to keep this within 19 points. Give me South Florida plus 19 at Florida. I mean, I'd love to bet on this Cal Poly Utah game, but I think I'm going to skip that one. Bethune-Cookman. Who wants to take them plus 56 at Miami? Not me. We're going to move past that one. Give me Western Kentucky plus 8 at Toledo. I watched Toledo last week play my Kentucky Wildcats. Their defense is pretty good. Kentucky's offense is pretty bad. Their offense is better than they showed last week. I think they can run the ball pretty well, but their offense really struggled against a new Kentucky defense that's not that stout. Give me Western Kentucky to cover the 7.5 points. Not a big home field advantage there, but Western Kentucky is a pretty good team, and giving them 8 points against Toledo, I'll take Western Kentucky in that game. Michigan, Oklahoma is the big game of the night, but I'm going to skip and come back to that one because I want to give you my pick on the Virginia Tech Vanderbilt game. I think Virginia Tech in Blacksburg gets it done. I don't think Vandy can go on the road and take care of Virginia Tech in a night game. So give me Virginia Tech, who is only a 1.5-point favorite, to cover the spread against Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt regresses after last year. They had some big upsets last year. Alabama, that turned out to be not that big of an upset, clearly. But it was at home, and I think they're a little bit of a fluke. I'm not a Pavia fan, although I do think he's made a name for himself clearly there here in Nashville where I live. But I think Virginia Tech takes care of them tonight. And then the last one I'm going to give out is Michigan going to Oklahoma. This started out as a 1.5-point favorite, and it's gone all the way up to 5.5, which that's a huge move for an early game. That for a week 2 or week 3 game, that's a big move. So it's minus 5.5. The over/under is 43.5. This is not. If this was a conference game, I would be taking the underdog all day. This is a tough one for me. Michigan's rookie, I say that's an NFL term, freshman quarterback, going into Oklahoma against Venables. If I wish I would have taken this at 1 or 2 or 3, I would have taken Oklahoma in a heartbeat. At 5.5, I'm not going to take Oklahoma. I'm actually going to probably just lay off of this game and see if that number moves a little bit higher. If it goes higher, I'm most likely going to take Michigan because I do think that Michigan defense, even though Mateer is a really good quarterback for Oklahoma and I think he's going to have a good year, I do think that Michigan defense can keep it close. So those are the picks for today. Hopefully you have a great weekend. we'll be back with a few more NFL picks tomorrow. I think there are some really good opportunities that I teased earlier in this week. So we'll have a little bit more coming up. That's my cue. It's time to go. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day and enjoy your Saturday. Peace.